When an American general publicly criticizes an African military leader, the impact goes far beyond words. It shakes diplomatic corridors, sends ripples across continents, and raises deep questions about power, sovereignty, and security. Is exactly what happened when General Michael Langley, commander of the United States Africa Command, better known as AFRICOM, voiced sharp criticism against Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the military leader of Burkina Faso. At a tense Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, Langley didn't mince words. He accused Traoré of diverting Burkina Faso's precious national gold reserves not to fight the growing terrorism crisis, but to protect his own grip on power. These words hit like a thunderclap. For a region already struggling with violent, extremist groups, such an accusation felt like a betrayal. The stakes couldn't be higher. Burkina Faso sits at the heart of the Sahel, a vast, volatile region where terrorism is escalating rapidly. Groups linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda exploit weak governance and porous borders to spread chaos. The fight against these forces isn't just about military might, it's a battle for the survival of nations, the stability of entire regions. But General Langley's remarks sparked more than just strategic debate. They ignited a fierce controversy that cuts to the core of international relations: sovereignty versus cooperation. Can Burkina Faso truly claim the right to make its own decisions about security, alliances, and resources while depending on external military support? Or does accepting help come at the cost of surrendering control? Voices from Washington to Ouagadougou, from local communities to global capitals, reacted with sharp divisions. Some saw Langley's comments as a necessary wake-up call, highlighting mismanagement that weakens the fight against terror. Others decried it as interference, a challenge to Burkina Faso's sovereign rights and dignity. This clash reflects a fundamental tension facing many African nations today. How do countries build their own path to security while navigating the complex realities of global politics, especially when the external powers themselves have shifting agendas and alliances? General Langley himself clarified his position soon after the uproar. He emphasized that his criticism was not a political attack, but a military-to-military message focused on the urgent need for better allocation, and more resources to fight terrorism effectively. His words, intended for a specialized audience, were never meant to question Burkina Faso's sovereignty or right to govern, yet once military statements enter the public domain, their meaning often gets distorted. Media headlines and political rhetoric can turn professional concerns into accusations of disrespect or neo-colonial meddling. The result is an emotional atmosphere where diplomacy becomes a tightrope walk. In the midst of this, the terrorist threat continues to grow. Burkina Faso's borders are under pressure from groups recruiting, expanding, and striking with increasing frequency. This is not a problem isolated to one country. It threatens the entire Sahel region and beyond. So here lies the question. Can Burkina Faso balance its sovereign independence with the urgent need for external military assistance? Is it possible to protect national dignity while accepting support in this high-stakes fight? As Langley's words send shockwaves through international capitals, the story becomes about more than just accusations. It becomes a window into the deep challenges faced by nations caught between internal security crises and global geopolitical pressures. The answers will shape the future of Burkina Faso and perhaps the entire African continent. General Michael Langley stands at the pinnacle of U.S. military leadership in Africa. As the commander of AFRICOM, the United States Africa Command, he carries the enormous responsibility of coordinating America's military efforts across an entire continent. His job is to support African nations in their fight against violent extremism, terrorism, and instability. Langley's role is not just strategic but deeply operational. He oversees partnerships, resource allocation, and military coordination with countries facing some of the toughest security challenges in the world. From counter-terrorism operations to capacity building, his mission is clear: help African nations secure their borders and protect their people. But the task is daunting. The fight against terrorism in West Africa, especially in the Sahel, demands vast resources and relentless commitment. Langley has repeatedly stressed that the lack of sufficient funding and poorly managed resources are major barriers hampering progress. Without the right equipment, training, and financial backing, the threat of extremist groups continues to grow unchecked. During his testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, Langley made these challenges starkly clear. He criticized Burkina Faso's leadership for what he saw as a misallocation of resources, specifically the use of national gold reserves in ways that did not prioritize the fight against terrorism. His blunt remarks set off waves of reaction, with media outlets seizing on his words and many interpreting them as a political attack on Burkina Faso's sovereignty. The backlash was swift and intense. Headlines framed his statements as accusations of interference and disrespect toward an African nation's right to self-determination. The political sensitivities surrounding military cooperation, sovereignty, and national pride made this a highly charged issue far beyond the military realities Langley had intended to address. In response, Langley clarified his position. He emphasized that his comments were rooted in military resource management concerns, not political judgment. His focus remained on the urgent need for effective and well-funded military support to combat a rising terrorist threat. Langley was careful to respect Burkina Faso's sovereign right to govern itself and choose its alliances. He acknowledged the delicate balance. African leaders must maintain navigating external support while preserving national independence. Burkina Faso, like any nation, has the freedom and right to make its own decisions regarding security and partnerships. Langley stated clearly, despite rising geopolitical tensions, particularly as Burkina Faso's government moves closer to new allies such as Russia, Langley expressed hope for continued cooperation. AFRICOM still sees Burkina Faso as an important partner, brother in arms in the ongoing fight against terrorism. He believes dialogue and collaboration must continue. Even amid disagreements and changing alliances, Langley's position highlights the complexities of modern military leadership on a global stage. It's a role that requires navigating not only battlefield threats but also diplomatic sensitivities and shifting political landscapes. Every word and action is weighed carefully, as the line between military necessity and political consequence grows thinner. The message from AFRICOM is clear. The threat of violent extremism in Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel demands urgent, well-resourced and coordinated responses. The stability of an entire region hinges on the ability of nations to work together while respecting each other's sovereignty. As we look deeper into this story, understanding General Langley's perspective helps us see the larger picture, world where military strategy, international diplomacy, and national pride collide in unexpected and challenging ways. The next step is to hear from the man at the center of this storm, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose leadership is reshaping Burkina Faso's future. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's rise to power in Burkina Faso was sudden and decisive. In 2022, amid growing political instability and escalating violence, Traoré led a coup that changed the course of the nation. Young, disciplined, and sharply focused, he stepped into a leadership role filled with immense challenges and even greater expectations. His leadership style is often described as authoritarian, but beneath that firmness lies a deep determination to restore order and protect his country. Traoré is not a man for half measures. He governs with a strict hand, imposing control where he believes it is necessary, especially in a country where chaos and extremism have taken root. Since his takeover, Burkina Faso's political landscape has shifted dramatically. The traditional balance of power has given way to a more militarized governance structure. Political opponents face increased scrutiny, and dissent is not tolerated lightly. Under Traoré, the military's influence has expanded, aiming to stabilize a country gripped by insecurity. One of the most contentious decisions of his leadership has been his management of Burkina Faso's gold reserves. These reserves, the country's most valuable national asset, have sparked international attention and debate. Critics, including General Michael Langley and others in the West, accuse Traoré of using this wealth primarily to secure his grip on power, rather than directing it toward fighting terrorism. Traoré, however, defends his approach firmly. In his view, controlling the gold reserves is essential to defending national sovereignty. To him, these resources provide the means to fund the military, equip soldiers, and maintain the stability required to build a future for Burkina Faso. It is a harsh but pragmatic calculation. Without a strong grip on power, the country cannot face the mounting threats from within and beyond its borders. His decisions have not been without controversy. Shifting alliances, particularly his government's closer ties with Russia, have unsettled Western nations and complicated diplomatic relationships. Traoré's rejection of traditional partners and embrace of new ones signals a broader realignment, one that challenges old assumptions about African geopolitics. Despite the criticism, Traoré remains unshaken. He presents himself as a protector of his people, a leader willing to make tough choices in turbulent times. His focus is clear: survival, sovereignty, and the restoration of order. This man, once an unknown military officer, now stands at the heart of regional power struggles. His leadership embodies the tension between authoritarian control and the urgent need for security. Traoré's story is not just about a single nation. It reflects the broader struggles faced by many African countries caught between internal chaos and external influence. In the next section, we will explore the rising terrorist threat that looms over Burkina Faso and the Sahel, a threat that both Langley and Traoré are forced to confront, each from their own perspective. The threat of terrorism in Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel region has been escalating at an alarming rate. Over the past decade, extremist groups linked to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other violent networks have grown in strength and reach, exploiting fragile governments, porous borders, and deep social grievances. These armed groups have not only challenged military forces but have also disrupted daily life for millions of civilians. Entire communities live under constant threat of attacks, kidnappings, and forced displacement. Schools close, markets empty, and normal life grinds to a halt. Fear has become a daily companion for many in Burkina Faso. For the government and military leadership, the rise of terrorism presents a complex and multifaceted challenge. Troops face harsh terrain, limited resources, and the difficulty of distinguishing insurgents from civilians in remote and often hostile environments. Counterterrorism operations require coordination, intelligence, and sustained funding, all of which are in short supply. The impact on national security is severe. Regions once considered safe have become battlegrounds. Control over large swaths of territory has slipped from government hands, creating zones where extremist groups impose their own rules. This not only threatens Burkina Faso internally, but also destabilizes neighboring countries, deepening regional insecurity across the Sahel. Political leaders are caught in a difficult position. They must respond to the urgent demand for security while balancing international pressure and domestic expectations. Public frustration grows as violence persists and economic hardship worsens. At the same time, external allies watch closely, ready to provide aid but cautious about sovereignty and political dynamics. One of the most critical issues is funding. Without adequate financial support, anti-terror operations remain limited and reactive rather than proactive. Equipment, training, intelligence capabilities, and community engagement programs all depend on steady and sufficient resources. Yet, as we've seen, disagreements over budget priorities and political strategy complicate the flow of this vital support. General Langley's criticism of Traoré's use of gold reserves highlights this very tension. How best to allocate limited resources to effectively counter the terrorist threat. It is a stark reminder that the fight against violent extremism is not just military, it is economic, political, and deeply intertwined with the sovereignty of the nation. The battle against terrorism in Burkina Faso is one of the most pressing issues of our time. It affects lives, shapes governments, and defines the future of the entire Sahel region. As the threat grows, so too does the urgency for solutions that balance security, sovereignty, and sustainable development. Next, we will look closer at how international partnerships and military cooperation play into this fight and what it means for Burkina Faso's path forward. Sovereignty is the lifeblood of any nation. It is the right to govern itself, to make its own decisions free from external control. For Burkina Faso, sovereignty means much more than a concept. It is a hard-earned claim shaped by history, struggle, and the ongoing fight to define its own future. Yet, in the face of escalating terrorism and security challenges, this sovereignty faces unprecedented pressure. International military partners like the United States and other Western countries are deeply involved in the fight against violent extremism in the Sahel. They offer support, training, intelligence, funding, but this support often comes with expectations, conditions, and sometimes subtle demands. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this creates a complex dilemma. Aligning too closely with foreign powers risks appearing weak or dependent, potentially stirring nationalistic backlash and accusations of losing control over his country's destiny. On the other hand, rejecting external assistance outright could leave Burkina Faso isolated, struggling to confront a threat that knows no borders. Foreign alliances bring both risks and benefits. On the positive side, partnerships can provide vital resources that Burkina Faso's military lacks. Access to advanced technology, logistical support, and intelligence sharing can enhance the effectiveness of counterterrorism operations. Moreover, international cooperation signals Burkina Faso's commitment to regional stability, opening doors to broader diplomatic and economic opportunities. However, these alliances also carry risks. Dependence on foreign aid can erode autonomy, making national policies subject to outside influence. Past experiences in Africa show how external powers sometimes prioritize their own strategic interests over the true needs of the local population. Suspicion grows that military cooperation may mask attempts to control resources or political decisions behind a veil of security concerns. Traoré walks a tightrope between these competing forces. His leadership reflects a determination to defend Burkina Faso's sovereignty fiercely, even as he navigates the practical realities of limited military capacity. His controversial decisions, as reallocating gold reserves, can be seen as efforts to fund an independent security strategy, free from over-reliance on external partners. At the same time, Traoré must maintain enough cooperation with international forces to keep critical support flowing. His recent pivot toward new alliances, including closer ties with Russia, signals a strategic recalibration designed to diversify Burkina Faso's partnerships and reduce dependence on traditional Western backers. This balancing act defines much of the current political and military tension surrounding Burkina Faso. It embodies the core dilemma faced by many nations caught between the demands of sovereignty and the realities of international security. Cooperation. Understanding this dynamic is essential to grasp why criticisms like those from General Langley resonate so deeply, and why Traoré's leadership style and decisions remain fiercely debated. The story unfolding in Burkina Faso is not just about combating terrorism. It is about a nation striving to assert its independence while confronting threats that transcend borders. As we continue, we'll explore how these tensions shape the country's foreign relations and what they mean for the future of Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel region. Burkina Faso's recent geopolitical moves have sent ripples far beyond its borders. For decades, the country maintained close ties with Western nations, particularly the United States and European partners, relying heavily on their support for security and development. But as the pressures of terrorism and political change intensified, Burkina Faso began rethinking its alliances, ushering in a significant pivot toward Russia. This shift did not happen overnight. It reflects a broader trend across parts of Africa, where nations seek to diversify their partners, resisting overdependence on traditional Western powers whose influence sometimes comes with strings attached. For Burkina Faso, Russia offered a compelling alternative military support without the overt political conditions and a chance to assert greater sovereignty in decision-making. Russia's role in the Sahel and West Africa has grown steadily. Over recent years, it has provided arms, training, and diplomatic backing to governments confronting insurgency and instability. Unlike some Western donors, Russia often emphasizes respect for national autonomy and offers assistance with fewer public demands for internal reforms. This approach resonates with leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who view it as a way to strengthen security while maintaining political control. The effects of Burkina Faso's pivot to Russia are multifaceted. On one hand, it has enabled the country to access new military equipment and expertise that might otherwise be difficult to obtain. Russian arms deals and training programs have enhanced the capabilities of Burkina Faso's armed forces, providing tools needed to confront terrorist groups entrenched in remote and challenging terrain. On the other hand, this shift has strained relations with the United States and many Western countries. Officials in Washington have expressed concern about the potential for Russian dollars influence to complicate existing counterterrorism efforts, reduce transparency, and weaken partnerships built over years. These concerns often translate into reductions or delays in military funding and aid resources vital for sustaining Burkina Faso's fight against extremism. General Michael Langley's public criticisms and calls for better resource allocation must be seen against this backdrop of shifting alliances. The geopolitical competition between Russia and the West turns Burkina Faso into a stage where larger powers vie for influence, sometimes at the expense of local priorities and stability. For Burkina Faso's leadership, the pivot to Russia is a calculated gamble. It seeks to leverage new partnerships to bolster national defense and assert greater independence from Western agendas. But this also risks alienating longtime allies, complicating aid flows, and inviting scrutiny on the international stage. Military cooperation has become more complex and fragmented. Burkina Faso must navigate the challenge of maintaining critical support from multiple sources, balancing divergent expectations while staying focused on the urgent task of securing its borders and people. This geopolitical shift is more than a strategic maneuver. It signals a changing world order where African nations like Burkina Faso increasingly chart their own course amid global power rivalries. As the story unfolds, the true test will be whether this delicate balancing act can deliver security and stability without sacrificing sovereignty or becoming a pawn in larger conflicts. Understanding this context is key to grasping the challenges faced by Burkina Faso today, caught between competing powers, rising threats, and the pressing demand to protect its people. Gold is more than just a precious metal in Burkina Faso. It is a lifeline. The country's gold reserves represent both immense economic value and a critical tool in its struggle for stability and sovereignty. But as Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership faces scrutiny, these reserves have become a focal point of fierce debate. For decades, Burkina Faso's gold has been a cornerstone of national wealth. It supports the economy, funds government programs, and underwrites essential imports. But in the current climate of unrest and insurgency, gold also serves a strategic purpose far beyond its monetary worth. Critics, including General Michael Langley and others in the international community, accused Traoré of diverting national gold reserves to shore up his regime rather than investing adequately in the fight against terrorism. They argue that gold should fuel comprehensive anti-terrorism campaigns and broader economic development, rather than protect political power. From Traoré's perspective, however, this view overlooks the harsh realities on the ground. In a country facing mounting threats from violent extremist groups, safeguarding political control and national sovereignty is inseparable from securing the gold reserves themselves. He sees the reserves as essential to maintaining the means to govern effectively and finance the military efforts needed to defend the nation. The gold funds weapons, procurement, soldier salaries, and logistical operations critical to the security forces. It also helps stabilize the government by providing a buffer against economic shocks and foreign pressures. For Traoré, controlling this resource is vital to ensuring Burkina Faso's independence and resilience. This dual role of gold, both economic asset and political tool, carries significant implications. On one hand, it empowers Burkina Faso to pursue a more autonomous path in a complex geopolitical landscape, supporting alliances like the growing partnership with Russia. On the other hand, it fuels criticism and suspicion from Western powers concerned about transparency, governance, and the balance of power. The stakes extend beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Gold's economic significance makes it a magnet for foreign interest, investment, and influence. How the reserves are managed affects regional markets and the broader political dynamics in West Africa. Traoré's handling of the gold reserves is thus a microcosm of the broader challenges Burkina Faso faces, a nation wrestling with the need to protect its resources, assert sovereignty, and maintain security amid competing internal and external pressures. As observers watch closely, the debate over gold becomes a symbol of the tensions between governance, legitimacy, and survival. It raises fundamental questions. How can a nation balance immediate security needs with long-term economic stability? What role should natural resources play in shaping political power? In the complex dance of international relations and national interests, Burkina Faso's gold reserves stand at the center, a shining yet contested prize that holds the fate of the country's future. AFRICOM, the United States Africa Command, stands as a key player in the ongoing struggle against terrorism in West Africa. Tasked with coordinating military support and strengthening regional security, AFRICOM's mission is both vital and complex. Yet, the challenges it faces on the ground are immense and multifaceted. General Michael Langley leads AFRICOM with a clear vision to support African nations in their fight against violent extremist groups that threaten not just individual countries, but the entire Sahel region. His approach emphasizes a combination of direct military aid, intelligence sharing, training, and capacity building. But even with significant resources, AFRICOM confronts hard realities that limit its effectiveness. One of the most pressing issues is the scarcity and misallocation of resources. Langley has repeatedly highlighted that insufficient funding and uneven military support hinder the ability to respond adequately to the escalating terrorist threat. Complex terrain, porous borders, and the adaptability of extremist groups further complicate operations, demanding constant adjustments and strategic innovation. Moreover, AFRICOM must navigate sensitive political landscapes. While its mission is military, its operations are deeply intertwined with diplomacy. Cooperation with host nations requires respecting their sovereignty and understanding local dynamics. The shift of countries like Burkina Faso towards alternative alliances, such as with Russia, adds layers of geopolitical tension that AFRICOM must carefully manage. In this environment, partnerships become crucial. AFRICOM's success depends not only on hardware and troops, but on building trust, fostering dialogue, and supporting local leadership. Langley advocates for collaborative efforts that empower African forces, enhance regional intelligence capabilities, and integrate civilian and military strategies. Despite these efforts, AFRICOM faces criticism from concerns over respect for sovereignty to questions about the effectiveness of foreign military presence in Africa. Yet, General Langley remains committed to the mission, emphasizing that confronting terrorism requires sustained engagement, adaptability, and mutual respect. This delicate balance between military necessity and political realities defines Africa's ongoing challenge. It must act decisively against threats while honoring the independence of the nations it supports. Langley's leadership exemplifies this tightrope walk, reflecting the broader complexities of security and cooperation in West Africa. As the fight against violent extremism continues, AFRICOM's strategy will evolve, shaped by the successes and setbacks on the ground. Understanding these dynamics is essential to grasp the full picture of the region's security landscape. Military statements often carry a weight far beyond their original intent. When General Michael Langley spoke critically about Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the message traveled quickly far beyond closed military doors and into the public eye. But the way such statements are perceived by the public can be very different from their intended meaning. In the case of Langley and Traoré, media outlets played a powerful role in shaping the narrative. Headlines focused on controversy, emphasizing accusations and clashes rather than context or nuance. This framing transformed a military-to-military critique about resource allocation into a broader political dispute about sovereignty and respect. Political actors, both within Burkina Faso and abroad, seized on the media narratives to support their own agendas. Opponents of Traoré highlighted Langley's comments as evidence of foreign interference, rallying nationalist sentiment. Meanwhile, some Western critics used the situation to justify increased pressure on Burkina Faso government. This polarization heightened tensions on all sides. The result was a complex web of narratives that influenced public opinion and diplomatic relations alike. What began as a specific military concern became entangled with national pride, regional politics, and international diplomacy. The fallout challenged efforts to build trust and coordinate security in an already fragile environment. For the people of Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel, these shifting narratives added layers of uncertainty. Distrust toward foreign military presence grew, complicating collaboration against extremist threats. At the same time, international partners found their messages diluted by political and media noise. Understanding this dynamic is crucial. He reveals how delicate the balance is between transparent communication and maintaining strategic discretion. Military leaders must navigate not only the battlefield but the court of public opinion, a space where messages can be distorted and weaponized. As we consider the broader story, it becomes clear that managing public perception is as critical as managing military resources. The Langley-Traoré conflict illustrates how information, power, and politics intertwine in today's complex security landscape. As we look ahead, the path for Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Burkina Faso remains full of challenges and uncertainty. The country stands at a critical crossroads, where the fight against terrorism continues to intensify, and the pressure to protect sovereignty grows stronger. Traoré faces the difficult task of balancing his nation's right to self-determination with the urgent need for international military support. This balancing act is not simple. Burkina Faso must secure enough resources and partnerships to effectively combat extremist threats, without compromising its independence or falling into geopolitical traps. The global landscape around Burkina Faso is shifting rapidly. Alliances that once seemed stable are evolving, and new players are stepping onto the stage. Navigating this complex web requires careful strategy, clear priorities, and a vision that puts Burkina Faso's long-term security and development first. International cooperation will likely continue to play a vital role, whether through traditional partnerships or emerging alliances. Burkina Faso's success depends on building relationships that respect its sovereignty, while delivering tangible security benefits. Trust and transparency will be essential to overcoming past tensions and moving forward together. At the heart of this struggle lies a deeper truth. The fight against terrorism is not just about military operations or funding. It is a political battle that involves governance, economic opportunity, and social cohesion. Strengthening institutions, addressing root causes, and engaging communities are as important as any strategic deployment or military resource. For Captain Traoré, the coming years will test his leadership like never before. His decisions will shape not only the future of Burkina Faso but also the stability of the Sahel region. How he manages internal challenges, external pressures, and the evolving threats on the ground will define his legacy as the world watches. One question remains. Can Burkina Faso chart a course that protects its sovereignty, secures its people, and withstands the complex forces at play? The answer will resonate far beyond its borders, reflecting the broader struggle faced by many nations caught in the crossfire of global security and politics. The story of Burkina Faso, General Langley, and Captain Traoré is far from over. It is a vivid reminder that in today's world, security and sovereignty are deeply intertwined, and the fight against terrorism is as much about politics as it is about military power.